Swayam Prabha. Digital India. Educated India.
So last time we began by understanding the notion of an isolated singularity at infinity. Much the same way as isolated singularity at a point in C, we can classify isolated singularities at infinity into removable pole and essential singularities. We then looked at various examples of computing residues and contour integrals. And let us begin by looking at some more today. So I'll just quickly recall the definition of an improper integral. So suppose you have a f from 0 to infinity to r, your function such that integral 0 to r fx dx exists for each r greater than or equal to 0, then we define the improper integral from 0 to infinity fx to be limit 0 to r, limit r tends to infinity, integral fx dx from 0 to r. Integrate from 0 to r and take limit. Similarly, if f is from minus infinity to plus infinity to r is a function such that integral minus a to b fx dx exists for each a comma b greater than or equal to 0, then the improper integral minus infinity to infinity fx dx is defined as limit of integral fx dx from minus a to b, a comma b going to infinity in any way. Yeah, so just f is said to be integrable if the limit exists. If f is integrable, then its integral can be computed as limit r tends to infinity, integral fx dx from minus r to plus r. So for instance, the function 1 upon 1 plus x square is integrable on r, while the integral of sin x dx from minus infinity to plus infinity does not exist, although integral from minus r to plus r sin x dx is equal to 0. There should be minus r to plus r. Integral sin x dx is equal to 0 for all r. So integral of this from minus r to plus r is always 0. But if you integrate from minus a to plus b and then take limit as a comma b tend to infinity, that will not exist. That is why it's important to define it as function to be integrable. If integral from minus a to b exists, limit of integral from minus a to b exists, and limit taken when a comma b tend to infinity in any possible manner. Okay, intuitively, for such an improper integral to exist, the function has to decay to 0 sufficiently rapidly outside a small set. So this is what we had seen. And recall the following bound we implicitly discussed in the last lecture. If pz by qz is a rational function with degree of qz at least 2 more than pz, then there exists a constant c such that mod of pz by qz is less than or equal to c upon mod z square for mod z sufficiently large. Thus, for a large real number r, mod pz by qz is less than or equal to c upon r square on a circle of radius r. Circle centered at 0 of radius r. Yeah. Now let's compute some more examples. Let's compute integral from minus infinity to plus infinity dx upon 1 plus x square to the n. So let fx is equal to 1 upon 1 plus x square raised to the power n. Proceed as in the previous lecture by taking contour gamma to be the union of a line segment from minus r to r along with the upper half semicircle of radius r oriented positively. Yeah, so we have seen this contour before, minus r to plus r, and then the upper semicircle going from r to minus r oriented anti-clockwise. So in this contour, which I have called gamma, there is only one pole which is at I. And we compute the residue of f at I, where fx is equal to 1 upon 1 plus z square raised to n. So change the variable from the real variable x to the complex variable z. So consider fz equal to 1 upon 1 plus z square to the n. There is only one pole inside this contour, which is I. So we want to compute. How do you compute? This function has a pole at I of order exactly n. So the residue is given by 1 upon n minus 1 factorial n minus first derivative of g at I, where gz is equal to 1 upon z plus I raised to n. Yeah, you simply multiply fz by z minus I raised to the power n, and then differentiate it n minus 1 times at I and divide by n factorial, n minus 1 factorial. So that's how we compute the residue. So I've defined this gz to be fz times z minus I to the n, which is 1 upon z plus I raised fz times z minus I to the n, so which is 1 upon z plus I raised to n. So yeah, so now it's a checking which I will leave. Just check that the residue of f at I is minus I upon 2 raised to 2n minus 1 times 2n minus 2, choose n minus 1. So this is a straightforward computation, computing the residue at I. So we know what the integral over the whole contour is, but now this integral over the contour breaks up as integral from minus r to plus r plus the integral along the upper circle, dz upon 1 plus z squared to the n. And by the remark earlier, there exists a constant c such that 1 upon 1 plus z squared to the power n is less than or equal to c upon r square on cr. My n is at least 1 here, so this is bounded by c upon r square on the circle of radius r. So any doubts so far? Thus, by the ML inequality, the integral tends to 0 as r tends to infinity. And hence the answer is simply this residue that we have calculated times 2 pi I. So when you multiply this by 2 pi I, you get pi upon 4 raised to n minus 1 times 2n minus 2, choose n minus 1.
Even if the degree of denominator was 1 more than the numerator, it would still be bounded by c by r. So it would be the same.
Yeah, but you see, the point is it's not enough. No. The thing is, it's not enough to bound it by c by r, because you also want to multiply it by the length of the curve, which also increases linearly with r. So when you multiply, it will not tend to 0. I want the function to at least be bounded by something upon r square, so that when I multiply by the arc length of the curve, it still tends to 0. Yeah, so it's good you asked this. I hope this point is clear to everyone. If it was only bounded by c by r, that's not good for me. I cannot conclude that the integral tends to 0 as r tends to infinity, because when you take the maximum value of the function times the length of the curve, it does not go to 0. I at least need a r square in the denominator, so that when I multiply by the length of the curve, which is linear in r, the product still goes to 0. Yeah, any doubts?
Sir, does this method in any way help us to show that the integral from minus infinity to infinity exists? Because this will just calculate it if it exists, right?
Yeah. But sure, but the proof that it exists also can be given similarly. I mean, you, instead of taking this semicircle going from r to minus r, you can take it from sort of b to a. So a and b are going to infinity in any way. You can use the similar kind of proof to also show that the integral exists. Probably that's what you were saying, right?
Yes, sir.
Yeah.
So if we take the integral from a to b, then we cannot comment on the other term, right? Like that will not go to 0. That will have some value.
Let's see. So no, that will also no, it will still go to 0. It will still go to 0. See, so suppose you have a and b. Let's assume that in magnitude, so you're integrating from a to b and taking a limit as both. So you're integrating from minus a to b and taking a limit as a comma b tends to infinity, right? Suppose, for example, let us say that a is smaller in magnitude.
So like even if we integrate from the bigger to bigger limits, we will still get some term.
Let's put it let us put it simply like this. Just without taking any contour, you can prove that the function is integrable, because just apply the ML inequality. So yeah, you are integrating from minus a to b. So suppose and suppose a and b are, let's say, large. Suppose b is larger in magnitude. So break up the integral as minus a to plus a, and then integral from a to b. And apply ML inequality to both the things, and you will be able to prove that the integral goes to 0. I mean, it's not difficult to show that this for any choice of a and b, integral from minus a to b limit as ab goes to infinity exists. That's not difficult. Just by sort of clever applications of ML inequality. You don't need to take this contour and all this. This is just for computing the integral. Showing that the integral exists is easier. Is this point clear? I mean, after all, okay, let
Yes,
argue. In this case, one can argue differently also. Instead of 1 plus x square raised to the power n, simply take 1 upon 1 plus x square. We know that is integrable. So 1 upon 1 plus x square raised to n will also be integrable because it's only going to be less than 1 upon 1 plus x square. Yeah. Just you can directly argue that 1 upon 1 plus x square is integrable from minus infinity to plus infinity because you actually know the integral, which is tan inverse of x. So that is integrable. So therefore 1 upon 1 plus x square to the power n is also integrable. Yeah, is this okay?
yes, sir.
Yeah. But even without that, I think by you just apply ML inequality correctly, you will be able to prove that the integral exists. I don't think you will have much difficulty. But yeah, I'm not going to the proof of that. Examples that we will discuss will all be integrable and so on. That's why I'm not. Okay, so this is the answer: pi upon 4 raised to n minus 1, 2n minus 2, choose n minus 1. So now let's come to a lemma, which first let's prove this so-called Jordan's lemma and then use it in one of the computations. So this says that if you have a continuous function f defined on the semicircular contour CR, which is r e raised to I theta, theta varies from 0 to 2 pi, of the form fz equal to e raised to I a z gz, where gz is a continuous function and with a greater than 0, then modulus of this integral f over CR is bounded by pi upon a times the maximum value of g on the semicircle. Okay, so you have a continuous function of the semicircle f, which is of the form e raised to I a z times gz, where gz is a continuous function and with a is positive, then modulus of the integral is bounded by this number, pi by a times the maximum value of g on the contour. So again, let's use our contour integration trick to proof integration fz dz over CR. What is this? By definition, this is integral g of, so fz was e raised to I a z gz. So integral fz dz over CR is integral 0 to pi g of r e raised to I theta e raised to I a r times cos theta plus I sin theta, and this dz becomes I r e raised to I theta d theta, integral from 0 to pi because you're only integrating on the upper semicircle. Therefore, modulus of this integral is less than or equal to, I can take the r outside, r times integral 0 to pi g of r e raised to I theta e raised to ar times I cos theta minus sin theta, taking the I inside the bracket, times I e raised to I theta modulus d theta. This r times integral 0 to pi, this I e raised to I theta has modulus 1. Similarly, e raised to ar I cos theta also has modulus 1. So that goes away. So you are just left with modulus of g of r e raised to I theta times e raised to minus ar sin theta d theta. This is less than or equal to, since sine is periodic about pi by 2, you get this is 2r mr times integral 0 to pi by 2 e raised to minus ar sin theta d theta, where mr is the maximum value of this function g of r e raised to I theta. So this integral from 0 to pi is 2 times integral 0 to pi by 2 times the maximum value of g times e raised to minus ar sin theta. So you have this, which is less than or equal to 2r mr times integral 0 to pi by 2 e raised to minus minus 2ar theta upon pi d theta. Yeah, I'll come to why this is so, which is equal to, now this is directly a computation, pi by a times 1 minus e raised to minus ar times mr. So I'm using the inequality sine theta is bigger than or equal to 2 theta upon pi in the interval 0 to pi by 2. So in the integrand, I'm replacing sine theta by 2 theta upon pi. This 2, since 2 theta upon pi is less and it comes with a minus sign, I get an inequality that the integrand, the second last step is less than or equal to integral e raised to minus 2a r theta upon pi d theta. And that when you compute, you get pi by a 1 minus e raised to minus ar times mr, which again in turn is less than or equal to pi by a times mr. Yeah, so this is because so just matter of using this inequality. I'll come to why this inequality is true, but just have a look at, just go through the steps once again. Yeah, so why is this last inequality true? Sin theta is bigger than or equal to 2 theta upon pi. You can just observe this by looking at the graph. So here's the graph of sin x, and that the straight line is the graph of 2 theta by pi. So because of the concave nature of sin x from 0 to pi by 2, the graph of sin x is always above the graph of 2 theta upon pi. This is what I'm using at the last step. Yeah, what I'm done is simply modulus of integral is less than or equal to integral of modulus, taken the modulus outside, gotten rid of all the terms which have modulus 1. Then I'm left with mod of g r e raised to I theta times e raised to minus ar sin theta d theta. That is 2 times the integral from 0 to pi by 2 of the same thing with and the g of r e raised to I theta is replaced by its maximum value. So 2r mr outside, integral e raised to minus ar sin theta d theta from 0 to pi by 2. Now use the inequality that sin theta is bigger than or equal to 2 theta upon pi. Substitute that, integrate the function, and at the very end use the fact that 1 minus e raised to minus ar is less than or equal to 1. And my a is positive, so 1 minus e raised to minus ar is less than 1. Just use that. Finally, you get the whole thing is bounded above by pi by a mr. Yeah, it's okay.
So it's
Yes,
okay.
sir.
It's okay.
Yes, sir.
It's okay, right? Yeah, it's all. None of the steps are tricky. Just sort of go on simplifying in the obvious kind of fashion and substitute whatever inequalities you know. Okay. Yeah, so this is an example. So this proves the Jordan lemma. This was just quickly. This was the Jordan lemma that we proved. Your continuous function on the semicircle of the form e raised to iz times gz. Then the integral modulus of the integral is bounded above by pi by a times maximum value of g on the semicircle. This is what we have just proved. Okay. Now let's use this in an example. So compute integral sin x by x dx from 0 to infinity. So consider the function e raised to iz upon z. Let gamma be the boundary of the upper part of the annulus a 0, comma small r, comma capital R. So you take only the upper annulus centered at 0 with inner radius small r, outer radius capital R. Yeah, this region does not enclose any poles of the function. The only pole of the function is at 0, which is not part of this annulus. So by Cauchy's theorem, the integral of fz dz along gamma is 0. So this is my contour along which I am integrating. Integral along the inner annulus, sorry, inner semicircle is in the clockwise direction. In the outer one, it is counterclockwise. My drawings are not very good, but I hope they're good enough to explain. So integral fz dz along gamma is the say break it up into sum of 4 integrals. Integral from little r to capital R plus integral along the larger semicircle plus integral from minus capital R to minus small r plus integral along the inner semicircle oriented clockwise. Yeah, so integral fz dz is equal to sum of these 4 integrals which bound the region. Now integral sin x upon x dx from little r to capital R is 1 upon 2i integral e raised to ix minus e raised to minus ix upon x from little r to capital R. This is 1 upon 2i integral little r to capital R e raised to ix upon x dx plus 1 upon 2I integral from minus capital R to minus small r e raised to ix upon x dx. Yeah, so we are interested in integral of sin x by x as from 0 to infinity. So what this is integral sin x by x from little r to capital R. Now I should somehow take limit as the little r tends to 0 and the capital R tends to infinity. Yeah. So in the first line where I've written that the integral of f is the sum of these four integrals, the first and third term give me integral sin x by x. The first and third term in this sum of four integrals is essentially the integral of sin x by x up to this 2i factor. Yeah, that is what I want. So what I want really is the sum of the first and third term. I know the total integral. So if I know the second and the fourth term, I will be done. I want the sum of the first and third term. I know the left hand side. So if I know the sum of the second and fourth term, I will be done. That is the idea. Thus, we only need to compute limit r tends to infinity, integral e raised to iz by z dz, and limit little r tends to 0, e raised to iz by z dz. This is what we need to compute. Yeah, second and fourth integral with capital R tending to infinity and little r tending to 0. Okay, so let's compute these. So we know that limit capital R tends to infinity, integral e raised to iz by z dz, this is 0. This is simply by Jordan's lemma, because if you take e raised to iz, if I take gz to be equal to 1 by z, see, look at Jordan's, let's look at Jordan's lemma again. Yeah, it was e raised to ia, in Jordan's lemma, the function is of the form e raised to iaz times gz. And then this is finally the modulus of the integral is less than pi by a times maximum value of g on the semicircle. Now in this case, in my case, g is going to be 1 upon z. Yeah, g of z is 1 by z. So the maximum value, I'm sorry here. So the maximum value of 1 by z on the semicircle of radius r is 1 by r. So if I take limit as r tends to infinity, that is going to be 0. So straight away, trivial application of Jordan lemma tells me that this limit of this integral is 0. I'm taking a to be equal to 1 and gz to be equal to 1 by z. So this, on the other hand, note that let's take e raised to iz minus 1 upon z. This has a removable singularity at 0, because you can easily check that the limit as z tends to 0 exists. So this has a removable singularity at 0. So therefore, there is a constant m bigger than 0, so that mod of e raised to iz minus 1 upon z, this is bounded by m, capital M, for mod z less than or equal to 1. Limit r tends to 0, integral e raised to iz minus 1 upon z dz, limit as little r tends to 0, this is equal to 0 by appealing to ML inequality, because the maximum value of the function is bounded by m. The length of the contour is tending to 0. So when I take the product, this will go to 0. This really, in some sense, this is e raised to iz minus 1 upon z. This really defines a holomorphic function in a neighborhood of 0. By assigning the value I at 0, this becomes a holomorphic function. So this integral is going to be 0, we all know. Or you can apply ML inequality. So therefore, this integral is 0. We wanted e raised to iz by z. So therefore, integral e raised to iz by z, limit as r tends to 0. This will be equal to integral 1 by z along gamma r. But integral 1 by z along gamma r is equal to minus pi I, because you're only integrating along the semicircle and you're also integrating in the counterclockwise direction. So it introduces a minus sign. So integral along gamma r, gamma little r, is equal to minus pi I. So therefore limit little r tends to 0, e raised to iz by z dz is equal to minus pi I. Therefore substitute everything. Now you know everything that you want. In the last line we said thus we need to compute these two integrals, limit of these two integrals. The first one was 0, the second one is minus pi I, the total integral is 0. Just make the substitution and you will find that integral sin x by x dx from 0 to infinity is equal to pi by 2. You know everything, you know all the values that you need. And yeah, any doubts?
Sir.
Yeah.
Sir, we should get pi by 4, right? Because I think we would be calculating minus infinity to infinity.
Sorry, we want to compute 0 to infinity sin x by x.
Yeah. So when you tend r to 0 and capital R to infinity, actually it is going from minus infinity to infinity, right? That the picture that you drew, the annulus. So
no.
Are you...
No. See no. Look at the left hand side of the look at that first equality. The left hand side is 0. The sum of the first and third terms is giving me integral sin x dx from 0 to infinity.
All right, sir, I got it. I was confusing it with the last question.
Yeah. So basically the point being that the first plus third term give you integral sin x by x dx from 0 to infinity. So therefore you are left to compute the second integral plus the fourth integral, and the sum of those two is equal to minus pi I. Yeah, so basically this integral sin x by x dx, there is this 1 upon 2i which is coming in the denominator. So the final answer will be this minus pi I upon 2i, and therefore it is equal to and you have to take it to the other side. So therefore the minus sign goes away. So you are taking pi I and you are dividing it by 2i. So you get pi by 2. Anyway, this is just substituting and rearranging the equation. So that is all trivial. The main point is to get the values of the integrals that you need. Yeah, so it's a very easy argument. It's a little difficult to follow all this through when you're reading the slides. Just go through it slowly again and you will have no difficulty. There is nothing tricky in this computation. Okay, so let us see one more example. So any doubts here? Let me pause for maybe 1 minute. Does anyone have any doubts? Any conceptual difficulty? Okay. So let's look at integral log x dx upon 1 plus x square from 0 to infinity. I want to show that this is 0. So we'll work with gamma as in the previous example. So this annular region in the upper half plane. So we take fz equal to log z upon 1 plus z square, where log z is a branch of the logarithm which is defined on the x-axis. So remember, I stressed this point in the earlier lecture that unfortunately log z is not an analytic function, not a holomorphic function. First of all, log at 0 is not defined, and moreover, even if you exclude 0 on the remaining on C star, log is still not an analytic function. The problem comes because of the fact that C star is not simply connected. So we have to restrict ourselves to some open subset on which simply connected open subset on which we can define log. So usually the standard branch cut that we took was we removed the negative x-axis.